Picture the most expensive dinner party you've ever attended. The fanciest one. The one where you weren't quite sure which fork to use and you spent half the evening pretending you knew what everything on the menu was. Now throw all of that away, because what I'm about to describe will make the fanciest modern dinner look like a service station sandwich. It is 1663, London. The restored court of King Charles II is doing everything in its power to erase 12 years of Puritan misery from public memory, and the method of erasure is primarily food. Specifically, food that has no business being eaten by any creature that calls itself a mammal. Food assembled not because it tastes good, but because it is expensive, because it is impossible, because it says to everyone sitting at your table, without a single word being spoken, I have money and connections and access to things you have never heard of, and if you'd like to stay in my favour, you will eat this whale product I've had dissolved in your wine, and you will tell me it's delicious. We're talking about a century when a pineapple cost more than a working man's yearly wages. When ambergris, which is, I want to be very clear about this, the solidified intestinal secretion of a sperm whale, essentially what happens when a whale can't digest a squid beak, and its body wraps the irritant in a waxy grey substance over decades until it either washes ashore or is carved directly out of the whale's intestines. When that was considered a delicacy and an aphrodisiac, and was stirred into sauces and dissolved into wine and presented to guests as evidence of your sophistication and global reach. We're talking about live birds baked inside pastry pies, not to be eaten, but to fly out when the pie was cut open at the table. Entertainment food, food as theatre, food as power. We're talking about roasted peacock served back inside its own feathers, looking alive again, because a peacock that just looks like food isn't impressive enough. A peacock that looks like it might stand up and walk away, that's a statement. Add sugar sculptures the size of small children, built from expensive imported sugar, coloured and gilded and arranged on the table as centerpieces, designed to be admired for an hour and then destroyed by the guests in a kind of sanctioned vandalism that only made sense if you understood just how expensive sugar was and how loudly destroying it in one evening announced your wealth. Add gold leaf. Actual gold, beaten thinner than paper, pressed onto the surfaces of food and eaten. Not for flavour, gold has no flavour, for visibility, for the conversation it started. Is that real gold on that marchpane? Yes. Yes, it is. Sit down. Eat the gold. Tell your friends. That's where we're going tonight. Not to the dining room. Not to sit among the lords and ladies with their embroidered coats and their practised expressions of bored refinement. We're going to the kitchen, where everything smells like singeing feathers and boiled bones and sugar burning at the edges of copper pots. Where 12 people are working in a space built for 6, in heat that makes a summer day feel like February, handling ingredients that arrive from 4 different continents and cost more than any of them will earn in 6 months. One day, one banquet, everything you would have touched and smelled and burned your fingers on and tried desperately not to drop. So I make these history stories, and honestly, most of you are probably listening to this right now because you need something sufficiently strange and distant to stop your brain from running its usual late-night anxiety loops, and a story about a man in the 1660s having to present a roasted swan to a table of aristocrats while pretending the swan's neck hasn't collapsed is, I will grant you, significantly more interesting than whatever you were worrying about before you press play. Subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Turn out the light. Here we go. The kitchen smells wrong before you even open your eyes. That's how you know something large is happening today. On ordinary days, the kitchen smells like wood smoke and yesterday's grease, and the particular sourness of a stone-floored room that has absorbed decades of boiled vegetables and spilled fat. It's not a pleasant smell, but it's a familiar one. It says, "This is Tuesday. Tuesday is ordinary. Tuesday will be survivable. This morning the smell is different. Sharper, sweeter. Wrong in a way you can't immediately name." You lie on your back on the straw pallet in the corner of the scullery, that narrow cold room wedged between the main kitchen and the yard, and you breathe it in before you open your eyes. There's something burning that shouldn't be burning yet. Not the main fire, that banked down last night and hasn't been properly stoked. Something smaller, and underneath it, cutting through the usual strata of kitchen smells, something floral and musky and faintly oceanic that you have never, in your 8 months in this house, smelled before. Your name is William Chambers. Will to everyone who knows you. You're 16 years old, and you came to London from a village in Wiltshire 8 months ago with a letter of introduction from your father's employer. A letter that got you an apprenticeship in the kitchens of Sir Edmund Hartley's townhouse on the Strand. Back in the village, everyone said London would eat you alive. They weren't exactly wrong. You open your eyes. The scullery ceiling is close above you. Grey stone sweating slightly in the cold of early morning. A single tallow candle burned down to a stub on the ledge above your head, still trailing a thin thread of smoke from where it guttered out sometime before dawn. From the kitchen beyond the door comes the sound of things happening. Multiple things, simultaneously, at speed. You get up. The kitchen of Sir Edmund Hartley's townhouse on the Strand is not by the standards of 1663 particularly large. Let me give you some sense of what I mean by that. Sir Edmund is a successful merchant. He has interests in the cloth trade, in shipping, in 1 or 2 ventures in the East India Company that he doesn't discuss openly at dinner. He is not a duke. He is not a member of the old aristocracy. He is what the 1660s would call a gentleman of trade, which means he has enough money to maintain the outward trappings of aristocratic life while knowing and being reminded by actual aristocrats at every opportunity that his money is newer and therefore somehow less real than theirs. His townhouse is 4 stories, 14 rooms, a hall, a parlour, a withdrawing room, a study, 6 bedchambers, assorted closets and passages and spaces with no clear purpose. Staff of 12, not counting you. The kitchen occupies most of the ground floor at the back of the house. It's maybe 30 feet wide and 20 feet deep, with a ceiling high enough that the smoke from the main fireplace, which is roughly the size of a small room itself, with iron spits and hooks and a bread oven built into the side, can theoretically rise above the level where you're working before it chokes you. Theoretically. Right now the kitchen is full of people, and every single one of them is moving. Agnes, who is the kitchen maid and who's been here since before you were born, judging by the map of lines on her face, is at the long central table with her arms dusted to the elbows in flour, shaping something. You can't see what from the doorway. Tom, who is the other kitchen boy, 2 years younger than you and therefore beneath you in the hierarchy of the kitchen, in ways both of you take extremely seriously, is at the fireplace managing a pot that smells like bones and herbs and something sharper underneath. And Master Robert Fitch, the head cook, is standing at the far end of the table with his back to you, bending over something, making small precise movements, with his hands that you've learned to identify from 10 feet away as, "This is delicate work, and I'm concentrating, and if you interrupt me I will not shout." I will simply look at you in a way that makes you wish I had shouted. You don't interrupt him. Instead, you go to the water barrel by the door, fill the tin cup that hangs from a nail above it, and drink standing up. The water is cold and has a faint taste of iron and the barrel itself, and it is the best thing you've tasted in 8 hours of dreamless sleep. Then you look at the table properly for the first time, and you stop, because laid out across the entire length of that table, all 12 feet of it, from Agnes at one end to Master Fitch at the other, are ingredients, dozens of them. More than you've ever seen assembled in one place. A whole swan, neck and wings extended, laid on its back on a linen cloth, its feet still attached. Its feathers are gone. Plucked yesterday, you now remember, a task that took Agnes and Tom 3 hours and left the scullery looking like a snowstorm. But the skin is pale and waxy, and the neck curves with an elegance that seems inappropriate for something that is going to be roasted. Beside the swan, a peacock, also plucked, also intact. Its long tail feathers, which were removed with surgical care and wrapped separately in linen, are arranged on the shelf above, waiting. A haunch of venison the size of a small child, dark and dense with the particular deep red of hung meat. A collection of smaller birds, ortolans possibly, though they're tiny and brown and hard to identify, bundled together in a cloth. And beside them a pile of what looks like small animals, but which you'll later understand are dormice, plump and golden brown, already roasted once and waiting to be prepared further. Spices heaped in small ceramic dishes, saffron worth roughly its weight in silver, glowing orange gold in the firelight. Mace, nutmeg, something dark and powdery that you can't identify, several varieties of pepper, sugar, an entire sugar loaf, the size of your head, bluish white and dense, already partially broken down, and beside it, smaller portions of sugar in different states, granulated, caramelized to a deep amber, dissolved into some kind of paste. And then, at the far end of the table near Master Fitch's hands, something you don't recognize at all. A lump of something greyish, roughly the size of your fist, waxy looking, sitting on a white cloth by itself as though it has been given its own space out of respect or caution. That's the smell. That's what cut through everything else this morning. You stand there trying to identify it with your nose and failing. It's floral, but not any flower you know, musky like the inside of an old chest, and underneath everything, faintly, something oceanic, salt and distance and something vast. Master Fitch turns around and sees you standing there with the tin cup in your hand, mouth slightly open, staring at his table. He's a compact man, Master Fitch. Maybe 50 years old, though it's hard to tell. The kitchen ages a person. His face is ruddy from years of standing over fires, and his forearms below the rolled-up sleeves of his linen shirt are cross-hatched with old burns the way a craftsman's bench is marked by years of work. His eyes are dark and quick and miss nothing. They miss you now not at all. "You're late," he says. "You're not late. It's barely past 5 in the morning and nobody told you what time you were needed today. But you've been here long enough to understand that in Master Fitch's kitchen, the appropriate response to being told you're late is not to argue. 'Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir.' He looks at you for another moment, then turns back to the grey lump on the table. 'Come here.' You come. Up close the smell is stronger. Overwhelming almost. You force yourself not to step back. Do you know what this is? You look at it. It's roughly spherical, slightly flattened, waxy and dense looking. The surface has an uneven texture, like very old and very expensive cheese. The colour is a mottled grey-brown, darker in patches. No, sir. Good. That means you haven't ruined anything yet today. He picks it up carefully, cradles it in both hands, turns it so you can see all sides of it. This is ambergris. Do you know what ambergris is? No, sir. Think of the largest animal you've ever imagined. You think of the largest animal you've ever seen, which was a cart horse at a fair when you were 9, and then you try to imagine larger. Larger than that, Master Fitch says, watching your face. A whale, a sperm whale, an animal the length of this house and half the height of it, living in the deep ocean. You've heard of whales? Yes, sir. Good. Now, whales eat things, large things, squid mostly, and squid have beaks, hard, sharp beaks, like a bird but made of chitin. The whale can't digest the beak, so the whale's body does something strange. It coats the beak in a waxy substance layer by layer over years, over decades, building up a mass in the whale's intestines. You're looking at the grey lump. You're starting to understand what it is. Sometimes the whale expels it. A delicate pause. And it floats. For years sometimes. Oxidizing in the salt water and the sun until it becomes this. Smooth. Stable. Sweetened almost by the sea. He sets it back in the cloth with the same care you'd use to set down an egg. Or sometimes, he continues, you find it still inside the whale, which is how this one was obtained. He lets that sit. Sir Edmund paid 14 shillings for this piece. You do the arithmetic automatically. 14 shillings is more than you'll earn in 2 months. It goes into the wine tonight, Master Fitch says. Dissolved. Half a scruple. This much. He pinches a small amount between thumb and forefinger. In each bottle before it's decanted, it alters the flavour, makes it round, rich, opens up the top notes. He says this with the slightly tired precision of a man who has read this description somewhere and is relaying it faithfully even though he's not entirely sure he believes it. The guests will notice, or they'll believe they notice, which amounts to the same thing. Does it actually taste of anything, sir? Master Fitch looks at you. It tastes of wealth, he says, which is the only flavour that matters at Sir Edmund's table tonight. He picks up a small sharp knife. Now, today is the largest banquet this house has hosted since the Restoration. 14 guests. Sir Edmund's connection to the court is in the room, which means Sir Edmund's future is on this table. He gestures at the whole spread, the swan, the peacock, the sugar, the ambergris, which means nothing goes wrong, nothing burns, nothing collapses, nothing arrives at the table looking like anything other than the finest food in London. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. Go wake Tom, then come back. We have 12 hours. You need to understand something about food and power in 1663 before this day makes any sense. We live in a world where food is, relatively speaking, democratized. You can walk into almost any shop and buy a pineapple. Not cheaply, but you can do it. The ingredients that once marked a person as wealthy, spices, sugar, tropical fruit, refined products from distant parts of the world, are now ordinary. Available, expected even. In 1663, none of that is true. Sugar is expensive, not treat expensive. Expensive, expensive. A pound of refined white sugar costs roughly a day's wages for a skilled craftsman. A full sugar loaf costs more than most people spend on food in a week. The sugar that Sir Edmund has on his table right now represents money that could feed a family for a month. And he's going to let his guests smash it with small hammers. Spices, the nutmeg, the mace, the saffron, the pepper, came from the Spice Islands in the East Indies, a journey of roughly 17,000 miles by ship, taking years, involving extraordinary danger, conducted by companies that maintained private armies to protect their monopolies. When you put saffron in a dish, you are serving your guests a small piece of a war that happened on the other side of the world. Pineapples. We'll come to pineapples in a moment, because the pineapple situation in the 1660s deserves its own story. Don't even grow in England. They come from the West Indies or from glass houses maintained at colossal expense specifically to grow tropical fruit for rich people. And ambergris came from whales that died in oceans most people in this kitchen had never seen and would never see. And it arrived in London via a network of sailors and merchants and middlemen stretching back to distant shores. When Sir Edmund Hartley's guests sat down tonight and tasted their wine and remarked on the unusual depth of flavour, what they were tasting, whether they knew it or not, was a supply chain that circled the entire world. That was the point. The food wasn't just food. The food was evidence. Evidence that you could afford it, that you could access it, that you had the connections and the credit and the sheer audacity to assemble it on a single table on a single evening. And the people in this kitchen today are the ones who have to make that evidence presentable. Tom has been awake for an hour already. You find him in the yard behind the kitchen, crouching next to a wooden cage with a candle, peering at something inside. What's in the cage? He looks up. His face is smeared with something dark that might be soot or might be grease or might be something you don't want to know about. He's 14 and still has the look of a boy who hasn't quite grown into his own face yet. His nose is too big, and his ears are too big, and he moves through the world with the slightly apologetic quality of someone taking up space they haven't quite earned yet. Starlings, says. You crouch down beside him and look. Inside the cage, approximately a dozen small birds are pressed together in the darkness, still and quiet, their eyes catching the candlelight. Why do we have starlings? For the pie, a pause. The live pie, Tom clarifies, as though this is something you should already know. You stand up and look at him. Master Fitch said there's a pie, Tom starts. I know what a live pie is, you say. You do. You've never seen one. But you know what they are? It's one of the oldest tricks in the wealthy host's playbook. You bake a large pastry case, large enough that you could climb inside almost, and you fill it not with food but with live birds, small ones, starlings or blackbirds or sparrows. The pastry is placed in front of the most important guest. The guest cuts it open. The birds fly out into the room, startling everyone, making a chaos of wings and noise in the candlelit dining room while the servants chase them with cloths and the guests laugh and applaud, and the host sits back with a satisfied expression of a man who has just paid an extraordinary amount of money to make a flock of birds panic. The birds aren't eaten. The pie isn't real food. It exists purely as spectacle. How many, you ask? 12. Tom says. Master Fitch says 12. You look at the cage. The birds look back at you. They have to stay calm, Tom says, with the authority of someone who has been told something once and is now passing it on like he invented it. If they're upset when the pie goes to the table, they just sit there when the crust is cut. Won't fly. And then it's just a pie with birds sitting in it, which is terrible, you say. Terrible, Tom agrees. What do we do to keep them calm? Tom stares at the cage. I don't know, he admits. Master Fitch didn't say. You both stand there in the cold early morning of October 1663. Two boys from entirely different villages, united in their ignorance of the emotional regulation of captive starlings. Keep them in the dark, you say eventually, and quiet. Don't move the cage. Right, Tom says, and give them something to eat. What do starlings eat? You grew up in the country. Tom grew up in Suffolk. You have a brief, vertiginous awareness of the vast gulf between your childhoods. Worms probably, you say, or grain, something. Ask Agnes. Tom looks relieved to have a task. He picks up the candle and heads back into the kitchen. You stay in the yard for a moment in the cold, looking up at the slice of sky visible between the backs of the surrounding buildings. It's pale grey, not yet light. Somewhere in the middle distance a cart is moving over cobblestones. Somewhere closer, a dog is making a sound that is either barking or whimpering, and you can't tell which from this distance. Around the corner, down the lane that runs behind the kitchen garden, is the Strand. One of the great streets of London. Even now, before proper light, you can hear it. The rumble and clatter of the city getting itself started. Carts delivering coal and bread and fish and vegetables. Servants from a dozen grand houses making their morning trips to the water carrier and the market. And out there, in the tangle of streets between here and the river, however many 100,000 people are waking up this morning to a breakfast that is not ambergris wine and live bird pies. Most of them will eat bread. If they're lucky, bread with a scraping of butter or dripping. Maybe a piece of cheese if the week has been a good one. Hunger is not abstract in 1663. It's not a concept or a statistic or something that happens in other places. Hunger is the man who sleeps in the doorway of the church at the end of the lane, and the woman you pass sometimes at the market who is thin in a way that skin and bone can't quite explain, and the children you've seen in Southwark who look at food with an expression that has nothing to do with appetite and everything to do with survival. And tonight, 14 people in this house are going to eat better than almost anyone in England. You go back inside. The morning passes in organised chaos. There's no other way to describe it. Master Fitch conducts the kitchen the way a general conducts a campaign. He knows every element of the meal, down to the sequence in which each dish must begin cooking, and the precise moment it must be removed from the heat. He holds the whole architecture of the evening in his head the way a builder holds the plan of a cathedral, not as a single image, but as a sequence of decisions, each one depending on the one before it. Your role in this structure is at present relatively humble. You peel, you chop, you carry things, you hold pots steady while someone else stirs. You fetch ingredients from the pantry when they're called for, which requires navigating a pantry that has been reorganised twice in the last 2 days, and now operates on a logic that only Master Fitch fully understands. But you watch. Constantly. Every free moment your eyes are on Master Fitch's hands, on Agnes's hands, on the way heat is managed and timing is controlled, and flavours are built up from their raw components into something that smells like nothing you've ever encountered. Around 7 in the morning, Tom is sent to the market. This is a task you've done before, multiple times, but today the list is Master Fitch's own handwriting on a folded piece of paper, and the money purse is heavier than usual, and the instructions are don't take the first price you're offered for anything. Come directly back, speak to no one who's not a vendor, and for God's sake don't drop the eggs. Tom leaves with the list and the purse and an expression of someone who's been given a significant responsibility and is choosing to feel honoured rather than terrified. You peel parsnips and watch Master Fitch work. He's preparing the sauce for the venison. It's called something in French, of cameline sauce, he told you once, from the old word for cinnamon, which is one of the main ingredients. It's a medieval preparation, centuries old, made from cinnamon and ginger and vinegar and toasted breadcrumbs to thicken it, and a sweetness that comes from today, the expensive sugar sitting in its bowl on the table. The colour is a deep reddish brown from the spices. The smell, when the vinegar hits the hot pan, makes your eyes water from across the room. Will, you look up. What day is today? It's a test. He does this sometimes. Casual questions that aren't casual. Thursday, sir, the 15th of October, 1663. And what is the significance of October the 15th, you think? In the 8 months since you arrived, you've absorbed things about the rhythm of wealthy households and the social calendar in ways you couldn't have anticipated. The city has seasons, not weather seasons. London's weather is uniformly grey and damp with occasional intervals of worse, but social seasons. When the court is in London versus when it retreats to Hampton Court or Windsor. When Parliament sits. When the great merchants hold their annual dinners. When debts are called in. When patronage is distributed. You search. The last week before the court moves to Whitehall for the autumn season, sir. Master Fitch nods. He doesn't look at you. He keeps stirring. And what does that mean for a man like Sir Edmund? That this is one of the last opportunities to entertain before everyone scatters to their country houses for winter, sir. It means, Master Fitch says, still stirring, that every man of ambition in London is hosting a dinner this week. It means the men Sir Edmund wants to impress are choosing between several invitations. It means the food has to justify the choice they made by coming here. He finally looks at you. It has to be better than everything else they've eaten this week. Do you understand what I'm saying? You do. Yes, sir. Good. Keep peeling. Around 9, a delivery arrives at the kitchen door that changes the temperature of the room. Not literally, figuratively. 2 men arrive from somewhere. You don't see where they came from, only hear the knock at the back door and Agnes opening it, carrying a wooden crate between them. Inside the crate, packed in wood shavings, is the kind of cargo that makes even Master Fitch go still for a moment. A pineapple. You've never seen one in person. You knew they existed. You'd seen engravings in a book that Master Fitch keeps on the shelf in the pantry. A Natural History of the New World, published 30 years ago, full of illustrations of plants and creatures from the Americas. The pineapple in that book had looked like something an artist might have invented. Too symmetrical to be real, too geometric. The crown of leaves, the scaled pattern of the skin, the overall shape of a thing that couldn't quite decide if it was a fruit or a piece of architecture. The real one, sitting in the crate in Master Fitch's kitchen, is bigger than you expected and exactly as strange as the illustration. It smells, even from 3 feet away, like nothing in England. Sweet and sharp and tropical in a way that has no reference point in your experience. A smell from somewhere you've never been and might never go, carried intact across the Atlantic and up the Thames. Agnes stares at it. Tom, who has returned from the market with everything on the list and only 1 cracked egg, also stares at it. Don't touch it, Master Fitch says to nobody in particular. Are we cooking it, you ask? Master Fitch looks at the pineapple with an expression that is hard to read. No, he says, we're presenting it. Just displaying it. On the table. On a stand, he says. Specially made. It goes in the centre of the first table arrangement. The guests look at it. They don't eat it. You look at the pineapple. The pineapple does not look back because it is a fruit. How much did it? You start. More than you want to know, Master Fitch says. Later, Agnes tells you. £6 sterling. £6 for a single piece of fruit that nobody's going to eat. £6 is roughly what a skilled craftsman earns in a year. £6 could have kept every person in this kitchen fed for 4 months. £6 for a table decoration. And here is the thing about the pineapple in 1663 that I need you to understand, because it gets stranger still. You could rent pineapples. People did. Wealthy households that wanted the prestige of having a pineapple at their dinner table, but didn't quite have the funds or the recklessness to buy one outright, could rent one instead. The pineapple would arrive, be displayed, be admired, be returned the next day, and the host could truthfully say that there had been a pineapple at their table. This was a real economy. There were pineapples in London in the 1660s that had been to more dinner parties than most of their guests. Sir Edmund, it should be noted, has not rented this pineapple. He bought it. Because rented prestige, if discovered, is worse than no prestige at all. The morning stretches into a kind of pleasant, focused misery. Pleasant because the kitchen is warm against the October cold outside, and because the smells are extraordinary, complex and layered in ways that no ordinary cooking achieves, and because there is something satisfying about being part of a large, competent operation where everything moves toward a defined purpose. Miserable because your arms ache from the sustained work of chopping and stirring and carrying, because the stone floor is hard under your feet, because the smoke from the fire has been stinging your eyes for 3 hours, and because you have not eaten anything since last night's supper of bread and small beer, and the food being prepared around you is so far beyond your normal diet that being in the same room as it feels like a kind of torment. You eat what kitchen staff eat, which is not what gets carried to the dining room. This is a thing you understood intellectually before you started working here. That the people who prepare wealthy food don't eat wealthy food, but understanding it intellectually and standing in a kitchen watching someone prepare dormice roasted in honey and wrapped in caul fat while you're subsisting on yesterday's bread is a slightly different experience. The dormice. Let's talk about the dormice. This is one of the dishes that, when you first heard about it, you assumed was something exotic and foreign, something that happened in Italy or France but not in England. But dormice as food is actually an old English tradition, going back to the Romans, who ate them constantly and apparently bred them in terracotta pots called gliraria, specifically for the table. In 1663, dormice are still eaten in England, not by ordinary people, by the wealthy, who have them roasted and served as a sweet delicacy. They're small, soft-fleshed animals, and when they've been feeding well on nuts and fruit for the autumn, they have a sweetness to their fat that translates apparently into something genuinely pleasant in the eating. Agnes is preparing them now. She has 12 of them, fat and golden, already roasted once yesterday. Now she's doing something more complex, scoring the skin, packing a small amount of a spiced nut mixture into each one, resealing them somehow with the fat rendered from their own bodies, then arranging them in a dish for their second pass over the fire. Her hands move with the practiced automaticity of someone who has done this 100 times. Her face shows nothing. Whatever she might think about dormice, about the people who eat them, about the distance between these 12 small animals and the bowl of bread and dripping she'll eat at 6 o'clock tonight, none of that shows. You watch her for a moment. Agnes? Do they taste good? A pause. A very small shrug. Rich men think so, she says, which is not, you realise, an answer to the question you asked. Around 11, Master Fitch calls you over to the main fireplace. The spit is loaded. The large joint has been going for an hour already, turned by a mechanical contraption, a jack it's called, driven by a clockwork mechanism that was wound up this morning. The sound of it is a slow, rhythmic ticking that underlies all the other sounds of the kitchen. It turns the spit turns the meat turns brown and glistening. But this isn't what he wants to show you. What he wants to show you is the bird, the swan. It's been prepared now for its final stage. The carcass, roasted, is cooling on the table. Beside it, laid out with extraordinary care, is the skin. The skin has been removed in one piece. How you cannot quite imagine, because the bird is large and the operation seems almost surgical, and preserved with its plumage still attached. Master Fitch is reassembling the bird. Watch, he says. With the precision of a craftsman who has done this many times, he is fitting the roasted meat back inside the skin, pushing the neck back into shape, adjusting the wings so they lie naturally, smoothing the feathers where they've been disturbed. The effect is, as he works, increasingly uncanny. The swan is becoming itself again, or a version of itself, a dead thing put back together to look like a living thing. We do this so that when it arrives at the table, Master Fitch says, his hands continuing to work as he speaks, it looks like a swan that could stand up and walk away. The guest sees not just a roasted bird, he sees mastery. He sees the effort and skill required to unmake and remake the thing. He sees that his host values him enough to have employed someone who can do this. He smooths a feather with his thumb. And more than all that, he says, he sees that in this house beauty matters more than convenience, that we chose the harder path because the harder path produces the better result. The swan's neck curves gracefully. Its feathers are white and clean. It looks, from a foot away, almost alive. Is there something inside it, you ask? The neck looks wire, Master Fitch says. Iron wire inside the neck keeps the shape. That's brilliant, he says flatly. Yes, it is. You stand there looking at the swan that is not a swan anymore, and is more than a swan ever was. Do they know, you ask, the guests, that it's been done this way? Master Fitch gives you a look that is not quite amusement and not quite pity. Of course they know, he says. That's the point. They know, and they can see the artistry, and the artistry makes them feel something. The same feeling you get when you look at a painting and understand that someone made that. That hand shaped that thing out of nothing. A pause. Food is the same when it's done correctly. He straightens, rolls down his sleeves and turns to the next task. Go and see if Tom has killed the starlings yet. Tom has not killed the starlings. Tom has, however, moved the cage into a dark corner of the pantry and covered it with a cloth, and the starlings are quiet and calm in a way that suggests this was the right call. You check on them briefly. They're alive still, moving slowly in the darkness, and then leave them alone. The morning continues its push toward afternoon. At some point Agnes puts bread and a bowl of something in front of you and Tom and herself, and you eat it standing up at the edge of the table, quickly, because standing meals are the natural meals of a kitchen in preparation. The bread is yesterday's. The bowl contains a thick pottage of beans and salt pork that has been on the fire since last night, grey beige and not beautiful but hot, and filling in the way that things which are purely functional are filling. You eat it gratefully. Around you, the feast continues to assemble itself. The venison sauce is done and sitting covered in its pot, smelling of cinnamon and warm things. The dormice are on their second preparation, The peacock has been trussed in a position that suggests with unsettling authenticity that it might at any moment unfurl its tail and begin displaying. And there are still things you haven't seen yet. Dishes that are going to arrive later from specialised sources. A man is expected before noon with pastry cases from a pastry cook on the Strand. The pastry being a trade that even Master Fitch, who is professionally comprehensive in his skills, largely outsources for major events. The sugar sculptures are being made by a confectioner who works out of a shop near St. Paul's and who charges accordingly. You know about the sugar sculptures because Master Fitch described them. 3 of them. One depicting a ship in full sail, appropriate given Sir Edmund's connection to the trade, approximately 2 feet long and 18 inches tall. One depicting a castle, of no particular castle, with crenellations and a tiny portcullis and windows that, if you look closely, are each individually cut. And one depicting, in the particular style of the moment, an allegory, a female figure representing commerce, standing on a globe with a cornucopia of goods at her feet, all made from sugar paste, all coloured with plant-based dyes, saffron yellow, parsley green, a deep red from something he didn't name, all dusted in places with actual gold leaf, because apparently there wasn't enough gold leaf already in this meal. The guests will look at them for an hour over the course of the dinner, then they'll smash them. With small wooden hammers that will be brought to the table by servants, 1 per guest, wrapped in linen. Because having sugar sculptures is impressive, destroying them is power. Just before noon, you're sent out. Not to the market, somewhere specific. Master Fitch calls you over, dries his hands on his apron, and hands you a folded piece of paper and a coin. Go to the apothecary on Water Lane, he says, the one called Grimshaw. Ask for his preparation of civet, a small pot. He'll know what you mean. You take the paper and the coin. What is civet, sir? Master Fitch pauses. You know cats? Yes, sir. There is a cat, called a civet cat. It's not actually a cat. It's an animal from Africa and Asia, about the size of a fox. It has a gland. Another of his delicate pauses. Near its hindquarters, that gland produces a substance, a musk. When diluted and prepared correctly, this substance is used in perfumery. It is also, he says, watching your face carefully, used in cooking, in sweet dishes. A very small amount in custard or cream gives a depth and complexity that is considered. He seems to be selecting his words with unusual care. Fashionable, he finishes. You look at him. Fashionable. Fashionable? Yes. Go. Water Lane runs off Fleet Street down toward the river. It's a narrow street, one of hundreds in this part of the city, its buildings leaning toward each other at the top like old men sharing a secret. The morning is cold and damp, the sky the colour of wet wool, and the street smells, as most streets in this area do, of the river at low tide and of the industry that clusters near it. Tallow chandlers, printers, a man who makes rope from fibres you can smell from 20 feet away. A small eating house, where the daily menu appears to consist of whatever was cheapest at the market that morning. You pass a group of children playing in the gutter, not playing exactly, picking through it for anything of value. There may be 8 or 9 years old, dressed in layers of cloth that seem to have started life as several different garments and have merged, over time, into something unified by filth and wear. They don't look up as you pass. You find Grimshaw's easily enough. Apothecaries have a particular smell that announces them from outside. A sharp, medicinal complexity, herbal and chemical at once, overlaying the general street smell the way a strong voice overlays a crowd. The shop is small and dark, its windows full of bottles and jars containing substances of various colours and consistencies that you couldn't identify and probably don't want to. The man behind the counter is maybe 60, thin, with the slightly distracted air of someone whose mind is usually in a different conversation than his body. He looks at you, looks at the paper Master Fitch wrote, and nods without speaking. He disappears into the back. While you wait, you look at the shelves. Jars of dried things. Herbs, roots, something dried and brown that might be animal matter. A row of small bottles with handwritten labels in a cramped, confident script. Bear grease. Oil of vitriol. Theriac, which you know from Master Fitch's reference book, is a preparation against poison made from 64 ingredients, including, historically, viper flesh. Because the 1600s approach to medicine is essentially, if a thing is dangerous, consuming it might make you immune to danger. Grimshaw comes back with a small ceramic pot sealed with wax. He takes the coin. He looks at you with a mild professional curiosity. "You're from a kitchen," he says. It's not a question. "Yes, sir. Sir Edmund Hartley's house on the Strand." "Civet in the custard?" "I believe so, sir." He nods. "Tell your master a very little goes a very long way. A little goes in, the ladies say how refined. A lot goes in, the ladies say how peculiar." He pauses, and the gentlemen say the same, but less politely. You tuck the pot into your coat. "What does it taste like?" you ask, because the morning has made you genuinely curious about every absurd thing. Grimshaw thinks about this with unexpected seriousness. "Like an idea," he says finally. "Like the idea of expensive things. The mind tastes it and says, 'This costs money. This means something. The mouth isn't always sure what,'" he goes back to, "whatever he was doing before you arrived." You let yourself out into Water Lane, back into the October cold, with a pot of prepared civet cat musk in your pocket, and you walk back toward the Strand thinking about how many things you've handled today that you wouldn't have been able to name 3 months ago, and how many things in this city exist entirely in the economy of performance and impression, and how much of the world you thought was simple is actually constructed entirely of other people's ideas about what's valuable. Back in the kitchen, the afternoon begins to accelerate. There is a quality to cooking time that is different from other kinds of time. It moves with purpose. Every minute has a task attached to it, and the tasks stack in a sequence that cannot be reordered without consequences. You can't wait until the fire is hot enough to start the thing that needs 2 hours. You need to start it before the fire is hot enough and manage the heat as it climbs. You can't wait until the sauce is finished before you reduce it. The reduction is the finishing. And all of this is happening simultaneously with a dozen other processes, each with its own timeline, each dependent on resources. Fire. Space on the fire. Your hands, Agnes's hands, Tom's hands, that everyone is competing for. Master Fitch navigates this with a kind of grim serenity. He is in his element in a way that is almost uncomfortable to watch, because it's the kind of competence that makes you aware of your own incompetence. He knows exactly where everything is at every moment. He knows how long everything has left. He knows when Tom's pot needs attention before Tom does. Will the spit. Check the colour of the drippings. You go to the fireplace, crouch, look at the pan beneath the spit. The drippings from the venison are a clear golden brown with darker sediment at the edges. Golden brown, sir, dark at the edges. Good. Turn the spit a quarter rotation and come back. You turn it. The meat This close to the fire is almost too hot to look at. You can feel the heat on your face like a second sun. The smell at this proximity is extraordinary. The surface of the meat is deeply caramelized, the fat rendering down and smoking slightly where it hits the coals beneath. The smell is ancient and entirely fundamental, the smell of meat over fire that every human who has ever lived has known, and it cuts through every other complex thing in this kitchen and arrives in your body as pure, uncomplicated appetite. You are very, very hungry. "How long to supper?" you ask Agnes, on your way back to the source. She looks at the kitchen, does a rapid calculation of multiple timelines. "Midnight," she says, "if we're lucky." That's not supper. That's not even close to supper. That's the end of the evening, when the dinner service is finally complete and the kitchen is cleaning up, and the staff eats whatever is left over. You eat the last of your morning bread while nobody is watching. Around 3 in the afternoon, the confectioner arrives. He's a thin man with a slight stoop and hands that are improbably the cleanest hands you've seen all day. Not just clean, but almost white, with the slightly powdery finish of someone who works in sugar constantly and has absorbed it into his skin. His name is Mr. Slade. He comes with 2 assistants and 3 large wooden boxes. The boxes are handled with the care you'd give to newborns. The sugar sculptures, unwrapped from their layers of cloth and sawdust, are more extraordinary than you anticipated. The ship first. 2 feet long, every detail precise. The rigging rendered in pulled sugar threads, the width of horsehair, the sails curved and billowing in a frozen moment of wind, the hull showing individual planks picked out in shades of caramelized brown. You can see the decorations at the prow, a figurehead, human in form, bent forward into the sugar wind. The castle, slightly smaller, grander in its proportions, crenellations exactly as described, tiny windows, a portcullis of dark sugar. And around the base, a garden rendered in green-tinted sugar paste, with tiny flowers made from individual petals, each one pressed to shape by a tool finer than you've seen in any kitchen. And the allegory, the figure of commerce, 3-dimensional, standing on her globe. Her face, the confectioner's art at its highest. This, giving a sugar face an expression, is serene and slightly imperious. She holds her cornucopia. At her feet, miniature goods, bolts of cloth, barrels, chests. The cornucopia itself is coloured gold, the gold coming from actual gold leaf pressed into the surface. Master Fitch examines each one in turn, tilting them, checking the work, running a careful finger along the base of the ship to test stability. Mr. Slade watches with the steady attention of a man who knows his work is good and is waiting for someone else to confirm it. "Good," Master Fitch says finally. "The ship goes here." He indicates a position on the map he's drawn of the table arrangement, on a piece of paper pinned to the wall. "The castle here, the figure here. They need to be visible from every seat." Mr. Slade nods. His assistants begin calculating the sight lines. "The hammers," Master Fitch says. Mr. Slade produces them from a bag. 12 small wooden mallets, each one about the length of your hand, their heads carved into decorative shapes, spheres, octahedrons, small pointed things. They're wrapped in linen, 1 per guest, for the smashing. Master Fitch takes one, weighs it in his hand. "What's the timing?" Mr. Slade asks. "After the 3rd remove, I'll send out a signal." "The sculptures are built to withstand 1 good strike," Mr. Slade says. "More than that, and they tend to—" "Shatter," Master Fitch says. "Shatter," Mr. Slade confirms. into small pieces, so as long as the guests stop at one each, they won't stop at one each. No, Mr. Slade agrees. They never do. He pauses. The sugar is the finest quality, he says. White, the whitest you can get from the refinery. Each piece has a full ounce of gold leaf worked into the decorations. Master Fitch nods. Sir Edmund asked about the cost, Mr. Slade says, which is not a question but is clearly an invitation. Sir Edmund knows the cost, Master Fitch says. He approved it. A pause. He approved it twice, Mr. Slade says. The first time he made me repeat it. Master Fitch's expression doesn't change. Go and set them up, he says, carefully. You want me to tell you what the meal was going to look like tonight, from beginning to end. Because here's the thing about a 1663 banquet. It doesn't work the way a modern dinner works. You don't have a starter, then a main, then a dessert. Not in the way we mean those words. A formal dinner in 1663 is organised into removes, which is a better word because that's what happens. Food is placed on the table, the guests eat from it, and then it's removed and replaced with an entirely different arrangement. Sir Edmund's dinner tonight has 4 removes and a banquet. The banquet in this context is not the main meal. It's the final course, served in a separate room, often a room called the banqueting house, which is a room or pavilion built specifically for this purpose, consisting entirely of sweet things, comfits, candied fruits, marchpane, those sugar sculptures. But first, the removes. First remove, presentation dishes. The cold meats and elaborate preparations set out before the guests sit down, to be looked at while they're finding their seats and pouring their wine. Includes the swan in its feathers, includes the pineapple on its stand, includes several smaller preparations that Agnes has been working on all afternoon. Cold sliced game in elaborate arrangements, pickled and preserved things in decorative patterns, radishes cut into roses. Second remove, the substantial dishes, the venison, a roasted pig which arrived this morning from the butcher and which has been on the spit since noon, boiled mutton in a sauce, several different kinds of fowl, roasted, pasties from the pastry cook, potatoes. The potatoes deserve a moment. In 1663, potatoes are not quite the humble vegetable they'll later become. They arrived in England less than a century ago from the Americas, and they're still navigating their social status. They're not expensive. They grow fairly easily once you know how. But they're unusual enough to be interesting, and interesting enough to be served at tables where other unusual things appear. Sir Edmund has potatoes tonight because they are, currently, the kind of vegetable that says we're keeping up with what's new. Third remove, the lighter dishes, the dormice, the small birds, ortolans eaten in a specific and peculiar way that we'll come to, sweetbreads, a cream dish with the civet musk in it, the one from Grimshaw's pot, several fruit preparations, both cooked and preserved, the jellies which Agnes made yesterday, and which are set in elaborate moulded forms in colours that have no natural equivalent in food, and then, in the third remove, the live bird pie. Fourth remove, the table is cleared completely, and fresh bread and fresh butter and cheese are brought in, because after everything that has preceded them, the guests are apparently expected to still want more. And then the banquet room, the sweets, the sculptures, the mallets. This is the architecture of the evening. 4 removes, a banquet. Probably 5 hours of eating, start to finish, with wine flowing throughout and musicians playing in a gallery above the hall, because of course there are musicians. 5 hours. The men and women who work at a dinner like this are on their feet for 12 hours before the guests sit down and the full length of the service after, carrying dishes up the stairs from the kitchen, managing the sequence, retrieving dishes before they go cold, managing the fire, managing the wine, managing the guests' occasional demands for things that weren't part of the plan. You won't see the dining room tonight, not properly. Your role is the kitchen, carrying plates to the bottom of the stairs and receiving them back when they're done. But you'll hear it. The voices filtered through floors, the music, the occasional burst of laughter, and later you'll see the plates come back, the ortolans. I want to explain the ortolans, because the ortolans are one of the most specific and peculiar things on this menu, and they deserve their own moment. The ortolan bunting is a small bird, very small, smaller than a sparrow, barely more than a mouthful. It weighs perhaps an ounce. Yellowish brown, unremarkable to look at. In 1663, ortolans are considered a luxury in England, imported from the continent. They've been eaten by wealthy Europeans since Roman times, prepared in a very particular way. The birds are caught alive, fattened on millet and figs in darkened cages for several weeks, then drowned in Armagnac brandy, then roasted whole for approximately 8 minutes, and then, and this is the part, they are eaten whole. Head, beak, organs, bones, everything, in a single long bite, or as close to a single bite as the creature's size allows. The tradition, on the continent especially, is to eat them with a cloth draped over your head. The napkin covers your face entirely while you eat. The stated reason is that you're containing the aroma, which is considerable, preventing the perfume of the roasting fat and the spices from escaping. The unstated reason is more honest. You're hiding from God. Because what you're doing, eating a whole living creature, beak and all, drowning it in brandy first, is the kind of thing that even a person who has no difficulty with the moral dimensions of eating meat might prefer to do without witnesses. Master Fitch does not serve them with napkins over the head, he says, in the tone of a man making a cultural judgment he has made before and is not revisiting, that this is a French custom, and Sir Edmund's table runs on English custom, and if Sir Edmund's guests want to hide from God, they can do it at home. He serves them on a small dish, 6 birds, roasted golden brown, glistening with the fat of the Armagnac they drowned in. They look like nothing so much as small polished jewels. Tom carries them up the stairs. Afternoon becomes early evening. The light changes. The kitchen windows, which are set high and small in the stone walls to keep the heat in, first go golden and then grey, and then dark. Candles are lit. The fire is stoked. The rhythm of work shifts from preparation into execution. Things start going upstairs. The sequence is precise, and it must be precise, because cold food is a humiliation in a house where the cooking is meant to be magnificent. The timing between kitchen and dining room is managed by a footman named James, who runs messages between floors and who has the lean, contained energy of someone who lives in a constant state of near crisis. 15 minutes, he says, appearing at the kitchen door. Everything's ready, Master Fitch says, without looking up from the sauce he's finishing. 14 guests seated, 2 more expected any moment. They can wait. James disappears. You're at the breadboard slicing the loaves that will go up in the first remove alongside everything else. The bread knife is sharp. Master Fitch sharpens everything himself every morning, a ritual he does before he speaks to anyone, and the bread is good. Real bread, baked this morning, dense and fragrant. Nothing like the coarse stuff you grew up eating in Wiltshire. You eat a piece of the end crust while you work. Tom is watching the dormice on their final preparation over a small fire, basting them with honey at regular intervals. He has the focused expression of someone managing something delicate and slightly dangerous, which is accurate. Because if the honey burns, the whole dish is ruined, and the ruined dish is on him. Agnes is doing 3 things simultaneously in a way that should be physically impossible. She's checking the jellies, unmoulded now into their elaborate shapes, glistening and translucent on their platters, while simultaneously directing a girl who helps out on evenings like this, whose name you've never learned, through the preparation of a cream dish, while simultaneously receiving back dirty dishes from the first trips up the stairs and organising them for washing later. Will, the ambergris. You go to Master Fitch. He's standing at the wine table. 6 bottles, already decanted in dark glass. Beside them, the grey piece of ambergris and a small set of scales. "Weigh me half a scruple," he says. "Use the fine weights." You've used the fine weights before. They're for spices and expensive ingredients, calibrated to tiny fractions of an ounce. You find the small balance, the set of miniature brass weights in their leather case, and you weigh out what he asks for. The ambergris shaves off with a sharp knife. The shavings are waxier than you expected, more like an animal substance than a mineral one. The smell, this close, is intense in a way that's almost narcotic. That floral, oceanic, musky combination that you couldn't name this morning and still can't name now. "In each bottle," Master Fitch says, "equal amounts, gently." You divide the half scruple into 6 and drop a small amount into each decanted bottle. They float on the surface of the wine, those tiny pale shavings, like something dreamed. Master Fitch swirls each bottle gently. "It needs time to dissolve," he says. 20 minutes. Keep them warm." You set the bottles near, not too near, the fire. "Sir," you say, because you've been thinking about this all day and you might as well ask, does it actually work? The ambergris, does it actually... You remember what he said this morning about its supposed properties? Virile, impressive. Does it do anything? Master Fitch looks at you. There is a moment that is almost amusement on his face. Almost. It doesn't fully arrive. "You've been in this kitchen long enough," he says, "to understand what our job is." "Yes, sir." "Our job is not to feed people. Any cook can feed people. A bowl of pottage feeds a person." "Yes, sir." "Our job is to create an experience, to make the people at that table feel something specific, feel that they are somewhere remarkable, that they are special, that the man who invited them values them enough to have assembled the finest things in the world in one place, at one time for them." He looks at the bottles. If the wine tastes different to them tonight, it's because they know there's ambergris in it. The knowledge changes the taste. The idea of it changes it. The fact that it came from an animal in the deep ocean and cost 14 shillings and was put in their wine tonight for them, that changes how their mouth receives it. A pause. "Does it work?" he says. "It works every time." 5 minutes. James appears at the kitchen door. The kitchen becomes a different kind of controlled chaos. Dishes that have been sitting in their final state of preparation are lifted, checked, dressed with whatever final element they need. A scatter of herbs, a spoonful of sauce, a spray of preserved flower petals from the jar on the shelf, and arranged on their platters. The swan goes up first. Master Fitch carries it himself, both hands flat under the platter, his face showing the concentration of a man who has spent 6 months on this preparation, and will not drop it on the stairs for any reason. He walks upright, not looking at the stairs, feeling them with his feet, his eyes on the bird. You watch him go. Then the rest goes up in rapid sequence. Tom and James and the girl, whose name you don't know, shuttling between kitchen and dining room, each carrying something that requires care, each moving with a practiced quick walk of servants in a formal house. The pineapple goes up on its stand, carried by James alone, because Master Fitch doesn't trust anyone else with it. The ambergris wine goes up. You carry 2 of the bottles, 1 in each hand, warmth seeping through the glass against your palms. You get as far as the bottom of the dining room stairs. James appears at the top and takes the bottles from you. You're not allowed further. You stand at the bottom of the stairs for a moment and listen. The sounds above you, the murmur of many voices, are resolving into something quieter and more formal. A shift in the room's register as the first dishes appear. Music. The musicians are playing something you don't recognize, something with a lute and a viol and something else, a gentle complexity that fills the space above the conversation. Then, a sound that might be surprise, a collective intake, something being admired. The swan, probably, or the pineapple, or both. You go back to the kitchen. The kitchen during service operates on a different time than the dining room. Up there, things are slow. Dishes are placed. People eat at their leisure, talk, drink. The removes happen at intervals measured in conversation and appetite. A good dinner at a house like this takes 5 hours because nobody's hurrying. Down here, time is a sequence of tasks with no gaps. You wash the preparation bowls and implements that are no longer needed. You lay out the second remove while the first is still being eaten. You manage the temperature of the sauces that are waiting their turn, keeping them warm without overcooking them. You eat the bread Agnes puts in front of you and drink the small beer Tom refills your cup from, and you keep moving. The dormice go up in the third remove. Tom has done well with them. They look exactly right. Small and golden and glistening, arranged on their dish like a row of small jewelled things. You watch Tom carry them to the stairs and hand them to James and turn back to the kitchen with an expression of quiet pride. Good? You ask. Perfect, Tom says. And then, immediately, don't tell Master Fitch I said that. He'll only find something wrong with them. The live bird pie. It goes up on a platter the size of a cartwheel. The pastry case. Not a real pastry, not edible. Just a large vessel of baked crust with a removable top. Is golden brown and beautiful, decorated around the outside edge with a pattern of cut and crimped dough. Inside, the 12 starlings. They've been transferred from their cage in the pantry into the pie case with more drama than you'd like to admit. Tom and you crouching over the open case in a corner of the kitchen while Master Fitch was occupied elsewhere, transferring birds one at a time with cupped hands. 4 of them escaped briefly into the kitchen. The subsequent 8 minutes were not among the more dignified of your career. Master Fitch, when he turned around and saw you and Tom chasing starlings round the room, said nothing. He looked at the scene for a moment, looked back at his sauce and continued working. His silence was significantly worse than anything he might have said. All 12 birds are eventually in the pie. The lid goes on, it goes up the stairs. You follow it as far as the bottom of the stairs and stand there listening. A long pause, probably the pie being presented, probably Sir Edmund making some remark about it to the table. Then, the sound of the lid being cut. Then, a burst of sound from above, laughter, and underneath it, the rapid percussion of wings against plaster ceiling, the thin, alarmed cries of a dozen starlings suddenly finding themselves in a candlelit room full of people. And then the laughter gets louder, and then the servants upstairs start catching the birds, which you know from context involves considerable additional comedy, and the laughter doesn't stop for some time. You stand at the bottom of the stairs and you feel, briefly and unexpectedly, something that is almost pride. You caught 4 starlings running around a kitchen and put them back in a pie, and they performed exactly as intended. That's not nothing. The 4th remove passes. The kitchen begins, gradually, the long process of coming back to itself. Platters return, half cleared. The dormice plates come back with nothing left. The bread and butter plates come back mostly empty. The jellies come back in pieces, collapsed from their forms, their colours smeared together. The ambergris wine bottles come back empty. You collect them and set them aside, and wonder what the guests had said about them, whether anyone had noticed the difference, whether the idea of the whale had done its work at the table the way Master Fitch said it would. Then you go back to washing dishes. Around 10 o'clock, James comes down the stairs with an expression on his face that is more cheerful than his usual professional neutrality. "They're in the banquet room," he says. This means the sugar sculptures, the mallets. You look at Master Fitch, who is supervising the clearing of the last remove. "Go," he says, without looking at you. "Sir, the gallery, 2nd floor, the gallery overlooks the banquet room. Go and look, since you'll never stop wondering about it otherwise." You go. The gallery's a narrow passageway running above the banquet room, with a carved wooden rail and, between the posts of the rail, gaps wide enough to see through if you put your eye to one. It's dark up here. The light is all below. You find a gap and look down. The banquet room is small and close. It was probably designed as a private room, and has been converted for this purpose with temporary furnishings. Candlelight everywhere, dozens of candles making the room warm and golden. The sugar sculptures are on a table in the centre, surrounded by the guests standing in a loose cluster. They, as you watch, examining the sculptures with genuine admiration. You can see faces from above, candlelit and animated. A woman in a green silk dress is bent close to the ship, examining the rigging. A man beside her is holding his small mallet loosely, testing its weight. The guests are, for the most part, dressed more elaborately than you have been in a room with before. The men have coats of silk and wool in dark, expensive colours, with lace at their wrists and throats. The women are richer still, wide skirts in colours that exist in this room and almost nowhere else in the city. Their hair dressed with ribbons and pins and things that catch the candlelight. Sir Edmund stands at the edge of the group, talking to a man you don't recognise but who has the bearing of someone accustomed to being listened to. Sir Edmund, from up here and in this light, looks different than he does in the brief glimpses you get of him in the corridor or the courtyard. Taller somehow, more assured. The slight uncertainty you've noticed in him on ordinary days, the merchant's alertness, always checking, always calculating, has been replaced by something more settled. This is his night, his table, his pineapple, his ambergris wine, his live birds, his swan in its feathers. The guests chose to come here over every other invitation this week, and now they're standing in his banquet room, looking at his sugar sculptures with genuine pleasure, with the uninhibited pleasure of people who are being given exactly what they came for. Someone raises their mallet. There is a half-second of gleeful hesitation. The moment before you're about to do something you know is excessive, but have been given permission to do. and then they bring it down on the castle. The crack is sharp and clean, and the castle doesn't collapse all at once. One of the crenellations flies off. A chunk of the wall. Sugar fragments scatter across the cloth. Laughter, then a second mallet. The ship. The figurehead goes first. The little human figure at the prow, which Mr. Slade spent perhaps an hour on, smashing into 3 pieces with one good swing. More laughter. The woman in the green dress laughs with her head back genuinely, in a way that suggests she has forgotten, briefly, to manage her expression. And then it's general. All 12 mallets, all 12 guests, all 3 sculptures simultaneously. The sound is extraordinary from up here, a sustained cracking and crashing, sugary and sharp, punctuated by laughter and the occasional exclamation of someone who's hit their target particularly well. The commerce figure goes last. The gold-dusted figure on her globe, her serene face, her cornucopia. Somebody hits her hard enough that she becomes 2 pieces, the top half flying sideways off the table and into someone's hands. The room cheers. You watch from the gallery. The floor of the banquet room is glittering with sugar fragments. The table is a wreckage of coloured paste and gold leaf, and the remnants of 3 hours of work by a man whose hands are the cleanest in his trade. And the guests are delighted. They pick up pieces of the sugar and eat them. Some go on their knees to find pieces that scattered further. Sir Edmund hands a large fragment of the ship's hull to the man he was talking to, and the man examines it. The gilded surface, the tiny details pressed into the paste, and eats it thoughtfully, and says something to Sir Edmund that makes Sir Edmund smile. You stay at the rail until the room below has settled into the quieter business of eating comfits and candied fruits, until the mallets are gathered up by the servants, and the table is covered again with a clean cloth, until the scene below is just people talking and eating and doing the ordinary thing. Then you go back down to the kitchen. Master Fitch is sitting on a stool at the end of the table. This is remarkable enough to notice. In your 8 months here, you have not seen Master Fitch sit during a service. He stands, he moves, he demonstrates his perpetual motion as a kind of professional principle. He's sitting now with a cup of something in his hands, small beer, probably, or possibly something stronger on a night like this, and looking at the table where, 12 hours ago, everything was assembled and waiting. It's mostly clear now. The remnants of preparation. Odds and ends not yet put away. The white cloth where the ambergris sat. He looks at you when you come in. Well, he says. You try to describe it. The mallets. The commerce figure. The woman with her head thrown back laughing. He nods as you talk. Was the ship good? He asks, which is a question about Mr. Slade's work. Very good. The rigging didn't break. Someone had to really hit it. He nods again. Did Sir Edmund look pleased? You think about Sir Edmund's face when he handed the fragment to his guest. The smile. Yes, sir. Good. He drinks from his cup. Then it was good night. You stand at the edge of the kitchen, tired in all of your muscles, smelling of smoke and 12 hours of other people's food. Can I ask you something, sir? He looks at you. The people at that table, you say. They ate better tonight than most people in this city eat in a month. Yes, he says. Some of what they ate. The ambergris, the civet, the gold leaf. It wasn't even food, really. It was proof, evidence. Yes, he says again. Does that... You stop. You're not sure what you're asking. Master Fitch waits. Does it bother you? You try. Making food that isn't really about being food. He's quiet for a while. The fire has settled to embers and the kitchen is the quietest it's been all day. I grew up in Cheapside, he says eventually. My father sold cloth from a market stall. My mother took in mending. We ate whatever we had, and sometimes that wasn't much. He turns the cup in his hands. I've been cooking for 30 years. I've cooked for the household of 2 earls, 1 bishop and Sir Edmund for the past 7. I have made, he pauses, thinking, I don't know how many thousands of meals. Some of them were what you're describing, performances, demonstrations of wealth, and some of them were just good food. He looks at the white cloth, the ambergris wine tonight, the dormice, the sugar sculptures. Do you know what makes them real, despite everything? You wait. The skill behind them, the knowledge, the years of learning that go into understanding exactly how much ambergris goes in a bottle of wine before it overwhelms the grape. The years of understanding fire and timing that go into a roasted bird that comes off the spit exactly right. He looks at you. I am the best cook in London, not the most celebrated. There are men at court with better connections and louder admirers, but the best. And the food I made tonight was as good as food can be made. A pause. If someone pays for that and uses it to impress people they want favours from, that's their business. My business was to make it as good as it could be. He finishes his cup. That's all any of us can do, he says. Our best work in our own domain, and trust that it matters. He stands, which is the signal that the conversation is over. Clean up, then sleep. Tomorrow is ordinary. The clean-up takes 2 hours. Agnes organises it with the quiet authority of someone who's been doing this after banquets for longer than you've been alive. Dishes scraped and stacked, pots soaked in water and ash, the long table scrubbed, the floor swept, the fire banked, the scraps go in a bowl by the door. Tomorrow morning someone from the lane will come for them. There are always takers for the leavings of a wealthy house, bones for soup, bread for whatever uses stale bread can be put to. The remnants of sauces that could be stretched into something new. Nothing is wasted in the end, or almost nothing. The ornamental part of the roasted peacock, the carefully preserved skin with its extraordinary tail feathers, will be stripped of its feathers now and the feathers kept in a box in the pantry. Next time there's a peacock on the menu, the feathers go back on. They've been used 7 times already. Master Fitch told you this with the matter-of-fact tone of a man sharing a professional secret. The feathers can outlast the bird by years if they're stored carefully. The plumage is the display. The plumage is eternal. The bird beneath it is, in this context, merely an occasion. You finish the last of the cleaning and stand in the kitchen at midnight, in the quiet of a room that has been louder than this at every other moment of the day. Your hands ache, the particular ache of a day of sustained work, the kind that runs from fingertips to elbows like a slow burn. Your feet ache worse. Your lower back is making itself known in a way it wasn't at noon, but you are not hungry. Agnes put out what was left of the kitchen supper before she went to bed. A proper plate, not the bread and pottage of the morning, but actual remnants of the actual banquet. A piece of the venison carved from whatever was left when the platter came back. Some of the bread from the 4th remove. Real good bread, the kind served at wealthy tables. A small pot of the sauce. You ate it standing at the table because there wasn't time to sit. It was the best thing you'd tasted in 8 months, not because of what it was, because of what it cost. Not money, the other kind. The 12 hours of work, the knowledge behind it, the 30 years of Master Fitch's mastery, the journey of those ingredients from every corner of the world to this kitchen on the Strand. You tasted all of that, standing at the table at midnight eating from a plate of leftovers, and it was extraordinary. Tom is already asleep when you climb the stairs to the room you share in the upper floor. The small room under the rafters with the single window, and the 2 narrow beds, and the pile of your coats hanging on the single hook. You don't undress. You sit on the edge of the bed in the dark. The city outside is at its quietest, which is still not quiet. The Strand never fully sleeps. There are always coaches returning from late dinners, always servants and night workers and the occasional drunk navigating his way home. Somewhere west of here, toward Covent Garden, there's the sound of music from a tavern, dim and muffled, something with a fiddle. You lie back and look at the ceiling. You think about the pineapple. It's downstairs right now, in its spot of honour in the pantry. It won't be eaten. It'll be displayed again at another dinner, probably 2 or 3 more before it starts to turn. And then what? You're not sure. You think about the ambergris shavings dissolving in the dark wine, the 14 shillings worth of whale product that altered the experience of 12 bottles of wine in ways that were more psychological than physical. You think about the woman in the green dress laughing with her head back. You think about the starlings, which were recaptured after the live pie and returned to their cage in the pantry, all 12 accounted for, apparently unharmed by their ordeal, and which will presumably be released tomorrow morning in the yard, back into whatever life a London starling leads when it's not being baked inside a symbolic pastry structure. You think about Master Fitch on his stool, tired in a way he doesn't usually let show, saying, "The best cook in London." And you think about the bowl of scraps by the kitchen door, the leavings of a feast that cost more than most people in this city earn in a year, waiting to be collected by whoever needs them in the morning. Both things are true at once. The extraordinary skill and the waste, the beauty and the performance, the genuine pleasure of the guests and the cold bread you ate this morning because there wasn't time for anything else. This is what you're learning to hold in your head, that the world is not one thing. It's not the grand version or the mean version. It's both at once, in every room, every night. The dining room upstairs and the kitchen below it. The pineapple on its stand and the children picking through the gutter on Water Lane. The gold leaf on the sugar sculpture and the supper bowl Agnes will eat tomorrow morning from whatever the bowl by the door contains. You're not sure what to do with that yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's not a problem to be solved, just a truth to be understood. The ceiling above you is close in the darkness. The sounds of the city drift through the small window. Somewhere far away, a church bell begins to count. 1, 2, 3. You lose count around 10. Late. Later than you'd thought. Your eyes are heavy with the weight of 12 hours of work and the particular exhaustion of sustained concentration, the kind that uses you up differently than physical labour. Your brain has been running since 5 this morning, absorbing and cataloguing and trying to understand, and now it wants to stop. Let it. Think about the day from the beginning, from the outside. Someone in this city, a historian perhaps, or a curious person with access to the right records, will one day be able to say, on the 15th of October 1663, Sir Edmund Hartley hosted 14 guests at his townhouse on the Strand, and the dinner included ambergris wine and a live bird pie and sugar sculptures with gold leaf, and the cost of the pineapple alone was £6. And the head cook was a man named Robert Fitch, who was by his own estimation the best in London. They'll read that and it'll be a data point, a footnote in a larger story about wealth and display and the social dynamics of Restoration London. But you were in the kitchen. You held the ambergris in your hands. You chased starlings around a stone floor. You watched the swan in its feathers go up the stairs. You stood in the gallery and watched a room full of people in beautiful clothes laugh with genuine joy while they smashed £100 worth of sugar sculpture with small wooden mallets. That's not a footnote, that's the thing itself. The best and worst and most human thing about that evening, the care that went into every element of it, and the complete indifference to the care that was possible because you were wealthy enough not to think about it. Both true, both real, both yours now, absorbed into you in a way that no amount of reading about the period can replicate. You were there, the sounds of the city thin as the hour gets later. The fiddle music from the west goes quiet. The coach traffic on the Strand settles into occasional rumbles. The kitchen below you, which had been the noisiest room in your world since before dawn, is silent now. Everything cleaned and put away and waiting for tomorrow's ordinary. Tom breathes steady and slow across the room. Your hands ache, your feet ache. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You're learning something in this city, in this kitchen, in the service of this strange and particular trade, that food is never only food, that what people eat and how they eat it and who they eat it with and what they pay for it and what it costs to produce it, all of that is the story of who they are, who they think they are, and who they want you to believe they are, and that the people who make the food, who spend 12 hours on their feet so that a man's guests can spend 5 hours at his table, know more about all of it than anyone sitting in the dining room. They know the cost of the ambergris to the penny. They know what the dormice ate in the weeks before they were prepared. They know that the peacock's feathers have been used 7 times. They know that the pineapple might be rented next time, or it might not, depending on how the evening goes and what Sir Edmund reports back. They know everything, and they go to bed at midnight and wake before 5 and do it again. That's the story. That's always been the story. The people who make the thing, who understand the thing from the inside, from the kitchen, from the hands first position, they are never the ones who get to sit down, but they are the ones who know what it actually is. Sleep is close now, very close. The ceiling above you blurs slightly as your eyes lose focus, and the sounds from outside become impressionistic. No longer specific sounds with sources and meanings, just the ambient wash of a city existing at night. The London you came to 8 months ago was terrifying. Too big, too loud, too dense with people and noise and smells and things happening that you didn't have the context to understand. You got lost walking 2 streets from the house. You flinched when carts came too close. You ate what you were given and said nothing because you didn't yet know who anyone was or what they expected of you. That person is still in you somewhere. You can feel him sometimes in new situations, that specific flinching uncertainty, but he's not in charge anymore. The person in charge tonight walked through a city he knows, handled ingredients from the far sides of the world with steady hands, negotiated the complex social architecture of a wealthy house during its most important event of the season, watched the best cook in London work for 12 hours, and came home to a narrow room under the rafters with aching hands and a full stomach, and something new inside him that didn't have a name yet. Something that might, given time, grow into a person who understands not just how to cook, though he's learning that, but how to see, how to move through the world with attention, how to understand what the actual thing is underneath the performance of the thing, how to know the difference between the pineapple and what the pineapple means. That's not a small thing to learn. That's maybe the most important thing there is to learn. In 360 years, someone will eat a pineapple on a Tuesday without thinking about it. They'll buy it in a shop, carry it home in a bag with other things, cut it on a board in a kitchen with running water and an electric light, and a window that looks out on a world Sir Edmund Hartley could not have imagined even in his most expansive moods. They'll eat it because they were hungry, or because it was on sale, or because they felt like something tropical. They won't think about the £6. They won't think about the ship that carried it. They won't think about the display it was once part of, the stand it stood on, the guests who circled it with drinks in their hands and admired it. They'll just eat it. And that's fine. That's good, even. That's what the world getting better looks like. A luxury so extreme it needed its own stand and its own moment of social theatre becomes ordinary enough to eat on a Tuesday without ceremony. But somewhere in the chain of causality that leads from that Tuesday to this October night in 1663, there was a kitchen on the Strand, and there was a boy from Wiltshire who was very tired and had aching hands and was learning slowly what the world was made of. And that's not nothing. That's the whole story, maybe. The sounds are barely there now. A cart far away, passing over cobblestones in a rhythm like breathing. The last of the fire downstairs ticking as it cools. Tom breathing. You breathing. The city breathing. Let it all quiet down. Let the exhaustion take you the way it only can when the work is done and the work was good. Let your hands stop remembering what they were holding. Let the smell of the kitchen fade. Let the image of the sugar ship, the peacock on its platter, the woman laughing with her head thrown back, let them soften into something less sharp, less immediate, not gone, never gone, but resting. You were there. You were there for all of it. And tomorrow is ordinary, and that's all right. Tomorrow is ordinary, and you'll wake before the bells finish ringing and the water in the basin will be cold, and the floor will be cold under your feet, and Master Fitch will say you're late even though you won't be. And that's its own kind of continuity. The same as today, the same as yesterday, the same as all the days stretching out in front of you, full of things you haven't tasted yet and smells you don't yet know the name of, and people who will teach you something in a single sentence and disappear. That's London. That's the only London there is. Warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. This city outside, breathing, the ceiling close above you. Let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took a tired boy in a room above a kitchen on a night in October 1663, having held a piece of whale in his hands and watched sugar sculptures become archaeology, and learned that the most expensive things in the world are sometimes just ideas with a price attached. Let the world quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this. Take it. Good night.